So as way of an introduction, I work at Novartis up in Dublin, so I'm down to Cork just the last couple of days, and I'll be talking about things like, at-home screening, for example, in innovations. It's important because I'm from industry to tell you that I have a disclaimer. Basically what that means is what I'm talking about is my own opinions. It doesn't mean I'm necessarily representing what Novartis believes. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is really give you a bit of the context behind the experiences I have that bring me to this presentation today. We'll look at the trial design innovations, the clinical operations innovations, and then I'll give you some kind of perspective around how do we innovate in the future. But before I start, just in case you don't know who Novartis is, they're a pharmaceutical company based in Switzerland, but with locations over the world, and Dublin's one of those. They really have a purpose to reimagine medicine, to improve and extend people's lives, vision to become the most valued and trusted medicines company in the world, and we're underpinned by our values and behaviours. So that's really making sure that what we're doing is done in the right way to deliver for our patients. We have a strategy that really revolves around 5 key therapeutic areas. You can see there cardiovascular, renal and metabolic, immunology, oncology, and neuroscience. But we also have a number of platforms on which we deliver for these particular therapeutic areas. The traditional chemistry, biotherapeutics, but things that are a bit more novel and innovative, like xRNA, radioligand therapies, and gene and cell therapies. Very much pioneers in those things. And really the priorities there are to make sure we're able to deliver disease-modifying, disease-improving medicines to patients around the world. So bring it back to me, I guess, in terms of what I'm here to present to you and why I think I know what I'm talking about to some extent. I work within our global clinical innovation team in operations. So it's really looking at how do we improve the way that we can get access to the trials for our sites and our patients. As was mentioned, I've led the OneDCT working group, so really looking at how do we innovate to bring the trial to the patient. This is a group of more than 30 global representatives, 12 in-country representatives as well, looking at how do we evolve, how do we improve, how do we make sure we're doing things without creating silos as well. I've got over a decade in operations as well. But also what's interesting here, similar to today, it's about working with other people to really understand, well, what's the broader ecosystem? How can we all support each other in delivering for our patients? So I worked with Transcelerate, Trials at Home, which recently closed, eConsent Pharma Workstream, and IHI Ready, which I think is probably of particular interest to Ready there. That's research in Europe and diversity inclusion, which is really looking at in a European lens, how do we improve access to patients that are otherwise underrepresented and touches very much on what Sean talked about yesterday. So take a look at that project if you don't do anything else with this presentation. But I think it's important to kind of start and ask yourself, what is innovation, right? Because even within Novartis, there's loads of innovation groups. We're innovating in lots of different ways, drugs, processes. But really what I'm going to be talking about today is, what is it that we can do to make it easier for sites and patients to take part in trials? And that's from an industry perspective, but hopefully some of that translates as well. And why I'm doing that is because the goal really is to make sure we can increase that representation, we can accelerate enrollment, and we can give that differentiated trial experience. People come away feeling good about the trial. They really contributed and they feel that, they've been treated well. So I'm going to start with the trial design perspective, all right? So this is when the early stages, you're coming up with your protocols, you come up with your design. And there's many different ways to slice and dice this, but there's 3 kind of themes, I think, come in there. You're first asking, well, what data do we want to collect? How do we want to collect it? And then how do we want to analyze it? So when we're looking to collect data, we've got to answer the scientific questions, right? But we can ask those in different ways. So we've talked a lot today about pragmatic trials. There's an approach there, okay? It goes back decades from the scientific paper, but it's still innovative when it comes to new chemical entities. We can talk about reducing the safety data collection. So when we understand enough of a drug, do we really need to collect all the safety? Because we're just repeating the same noise. And then there's adaptive trials as well. So all this is really focused on reducing the amount of data and therefore the burden on the sites to collect that data as well, making it easy for the sites to take part. But we also want to make sure that we're enhancing quality. Quality is pivotal to everything we do. And can we do that through digital health technologies? We heard a presentation just here earlier. We're able to collect that data in a more continuous way, more accustomed to actually how the patient lives their lives in the real world. Even though in trials in the pharmaceutical industry, we're in controlled settings. Can we bridge that gap? Similar with smart sampling. Can we take the samples in the patient's home without them having the burden of coming into the site? Similar to telemedicine as well. Can we collect data over video calls, for example? We also want to accelerate results, because accelerating results helps us fail faster, helps us invest in the right medicines, but also helps us get the patients the drugs faster on the market. So can we use digital twins? These are virtual versions of patients, so we can get rid of otherwise control arms or the placebo group. Can we use the RWE control arm? So how does that compare to the general population and Bayesian statistics? And this is really about reducing the sample size, the number of patients we need to be involved, which can accelerate trials. And then what's kind of more interesting to me, I guess, from an operations perspective, is the patient and the site's perspective. So if we start with the patient's perspective, there's key things, and we've heard these themes a lot. Knowledge and trust in trials is vital for patients to be willing to take part in trials. They've got to be able to get to the trials or be part of trials. Accessibility is a key fundamental for me. And then they want to have that positive experience. We want to make sure that we've brought them through on a nice journey. So really what we talk about here is kind of broadening that reach. This is this inclusive, including people from different backgrounds, socioeconomic, etc. So what we look at there is kind of community engagement. And we heard some of that today around going into the communities, doing stuff for the communities that isn't just about the trial, but educating and making people aware of what trials can do and how it can fit as part of your continuum and your healthcare. Digital recruitment there as well, in terms of how we can get that messaging out over social media adverts, how we can tailor that messaging depending on the audience that we're looking for. And then the pre-screening aspect as well. So can we do as much kind of pre-screening earlier through questionnaires without having to bring the patient in, test them, and then they find they're not eligible? So hopefully accessing those patients is a little bit easier. We want to increase that representation. You'll see that's a bit of a theme throughout my presentation. And that's a lot about site location. So using a lot of data in the background, understanding where patients are, where patients of particular backgrounds are, and making sure we have the locations there. We know the majority of patients won't travel for more than half an hour to the site. So how do we make sure that we're putting our trial centres in the right locations? We can also go to the patient using DCT elements, so home nursing, direct-to-patient shipments of drugs, the telemedicines. So really looking at the ways that we can make it more accessible. And of course, there's patient support there. So even if you can get to a site, do you understand what's expected to you? So that's where you can bring in patient concierges who can help organise travel or answer those kind of non-medical questions that are just difficult to kind of navigate in a clinical trial. But of course, as I said, we want to make it positive. So that's where we look at things like companion apps. So everybody has an app for their banking, for their travel, whatever else. But for a clinical trial, that is often missing. So that digital aspect of being able to see in like a diary what's coming up, what to expect, that reduces a lot of the anxiety there. Reminders in there so people don't forget that they're supposed to be fasting and then they have to come in again because they couldn't do the fasted labs. Those kind of things can be in a companion app. We have an alumni registry, whereby patients that have completed the trial can then be kept informed of the results, maybe their own, with the individual return of results about the trial, but also made aware of trials that might be applicable to them in the future as well. So giving them the opportunity to be part of future trials as well. But none of this can really happen without the sites, right? Because the sites are the gateway to the patients. And all those things are beneficial to the patients themselves, but they're also beneficial for the sites. But for the sites as well, we really want to be able to help them to find those patients, to manage a trial and reduce the data handling. Nobody's going to disagree that trials are hard. They're getting harder. We've heard complexity. So we really want to do as much as we can with our partners and with our sites. So to help find the patients and help the sites broaden their reach and depth, then what we do is we look at where are those patients again. We have access to a lot of data. Where are the patients? Who are they being seen by? Can we connect the investigative site with those HCPs to help that referral process happen? Really include more patients there. Patient matching is about kind of going into electronic health records, electronic medical records, and helping the sites identify which patients could be eligible and surface those so they can be recruited into the trial. A medical record review takes a long time, but can we provide resources or tools that enables the sites to be able to do this, or collect medical records for referrals, because that can be quite a disjointed approach in a lot of countries. We also want to make sure that we're supporting the sites in the best possible ways, right? So training always comes up, every survey, train. We're not talking about more training, please, no, more training. What we're talking about is the right type of training at the right time, okay? So things we talked about, like the VR as a way of engaging people. We've looked at kind of virtual reality being used there, or kind of avatars, or like choose your own adventure type games where it's role-based or scenario-based, and that really helps that knowledge and understanding. Scheduling, just trying to schedule visits. So we have a tool that's AI enabled, which helps schedule visits between patients and the sites, because again, taking away some of that admin burden. It's difficult to always get the person at the right time on the phone. And then e-consent as well. Are there ways that we can help the patients understand the trial and support the sites in order to get that information across in a medium that really kind of is more understandable or accessible, if that's what patients prefer, not to replace, but to also supplement. And then we want to minimize the data be recorded. Now, we can't reduce completely the amount of data we want, but can we help the sites reduce the admin burden of that? So what about eSource, for example, where we look at having to enter the data just maybe once instead of having to transcribe it into the EHR? If the data is already in the EHR or EMR, so it's electronic health record, electronic medical record, can that be transferred automatically to the EDC system, the electronic data capture system, instead of having a site coordinator fill that data into the EDC system? And we heard about it as well today, data linkage and tokenization. Is there a way that we can continue to collect patients' data after the trial without having to have sites reach out for it? Or can we use that data actually earlier on to help with eligibility and medical histories as well? So that's kind of where we are at the minute, but where are we going to go into the future, right? Or what could we possibly do, right? We know we need to prioritize inclusivity, speed, and data quality in there. But the people in this room are really going to be the ones, and we heard from the PhD students, what the future is going to look like and how we're going to move forward with this. And what's important to think about is we need to innovate to stay current, right? In the pharmaceutical industry, as maybe you do here everywhere else, we always laugh at that phrase, change is the only constant. We're constantly changing, constantly innovating. Nothing stays the same. But that's because innovation can create the potential to be inclusive and get medicines to patients faster. But it's not itself just an idea, it's a process. There's a lot of work that goes into this. We heard about it being hard. You've got to really kind of embrace the fact that it might take time. It's going to be incremental, but it's going to make a difference. Be it small or take time, it's going to make a difference. And that's why these key sets of skills are necessary. That's the curiosity, the want to ask that question, how can we do this better? What's better for patients? What's better for the way that we can run our trials? Collaboration. Nobody does anything on their own. You might think you're the best expert in anything. You're not. And we even heard today, you've got to talk to patients, you've got to talk to investigators, you've got to talk to your colleagues. Different perspectives really help. Problem solving, there'll always be problems, always lessons learned, always things to be doing. And grit. So grit is this kind of overarching term for the persistence and patience and willingness to bear with it when it all seems as if it's going to fail and projects get cancelled or people don't deliver. And you hear that a lot. And that's what makes this group and these people really special, right? Because we're the ones that have been through this. We understand how hard it is, but we keep going because we have that vision. We have our North Star of the delivery of better trials, for better medicines, for better treatments and outcomes for patients. But what about AI, right? You're probably thinking, hey, he hasn't mentioned AI except for once, right? I go to conferences all the time, and all they talk about is AI, right? The good news is Hans, after me, is going to cover this in a bit more detail. So I'm going to give you a perspective from kind of the industry and running a trial. The important thing to mention here is, from my perspective, trials are always people being treated by people. It's always doctors being treated by physicians or pharmacists seeing a patient, right? So AI can't really take away that human connection. but it can definitely augment how we do our innovation, right? Because it can do very powerful things in terms of gathering information, doing the analysis, but it's not going to innovate for you in an ideal way, right? And you'll find this, I've heard this said before, AI will take something from average to good, but you can never take it from good to great, because the great involves that needing to think beyond what's the average that's out there that the data set has learned from. So it's important to maintain that mindset, to look for the ways to innovate, those people skills to make it work for your stakeholders as well, because that is really what's going to drive the success. How do you bring that change in management into innovation? How do you make sure that people understand what you want to do and what you want to achieve? Because change is scary for everybody. And that's that part of that process that goes beyond just an idea. And that's where I finish. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. I'm obviously open to questions when we come to the end of the session. Thank you very much.